I'm Anton. I test services, web, and all other stuff since 2012. I like to break backend services. Backend services are my favorite choice for testing. And currently I'm using, I would say, random languages to automate routine and test. Mostly I use Java, Python, and now I start using JS and TypeScript, which are also very cool and I like it. In case you want to ask any question or just chat with me, you can find me on Telegram or Twitter. So today we will talk about testing library, but before touching the main character, I'd like to just reiterate what we have. I would say that web UI testing is the most, like the biggest part of testing we have now. A lot of people are in this field, a lot of automation engineers. I believe the king is still Selenium, which was bumped to the version 4 recently. It was like 3 years for them to change the major version. This tool is the most popular. It's written in Java. A lot of engineers are using it every day. But in the meantime, JS ecosystem grows a lot of other tools. And you may see the tools like Puppeteer, Playwright, Cypress, WebDriver IO. There are a lot of. And first of all, I'd like to ask you, for example, for these tools, what is the main similarity for them? Can you answer in chat or just say right now what's the main similarity between these tools? Any guess? Okay, I will not put a huge pause here. They are all using browsers. And even though you can start your Selenium tests on one machine and your browser will run on another, you still need a browser. And the main disadvantage is that browser needs a lot of resources. For example, for Chrome, you have to have like at least 2 GB RAM and 1 CPU on the machine to run the tests. And when we are talking about local development, when people want to give fast feedback loop, and when they want like easily change something and just get the feedback, does it work or not, these heavy lifting tasks to run browser doesn't work well, I would say. And recently I tried new tool. It's called testing library. And today I just want to show some examples how this tool, I would say that mainly this tool is useful for developers because you have to know about the internal parts of your application to start with. But I really think that even test engineers will be able to use it. And I like the freshness of their of their choices how to automate the UI, because they changed a little bit the way how you write the tests. And I think it's also very important. I will mention it later. So under the hood, testing library use the JS DOM. What's what this tool is about. JSDOM is just a library, and this library, the main goal is to emulate enough of subset of web browser standards to be useful for testing. So instead of running this huge monster, the browser, Chrome, Firefox, whatsoever, you have a library that will parse the HTML, JS, and other stuff, and will try to emulate the behavior of the browser. So DOM testing library is a wrapper around this JS DOM, and it provides you lightweight solution to test your UI and components. You even don't need to run all the application. You don't need to deploy this application somewhere. You may just start testing on your local machine, and the feedback loop provided by this testing library is really fast. And I will show you. We will try different things. So the main plan about today's demo is to show you simple test written using Puppeteer. Then we will switch to JS DOM, and then I will show DOM testing library, and at the end I will try to add the testing library test case to the existing application. We already talked about it. I will use a real world example app. It's basically clone of medium.com application that is written using Vue.js. It's a popular framework from NodeJS community. So we can start now. Let me open my console. The first part I would like to show you just the regular Puppeteer tests. This is the test. Can you show my screen? Is the font size enough to read it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So first I will show you the application. It's just simple to do app. Sorry, just a second. I need to open it. Okay. See, this is just really simple app. It's to-do list. I can write buy milk, play games, whatsoever. It's really easy. You may only add something to the list and you may delete from it. And let's see how the test with Puppeteer will look like. So basically, first we need to create the page object, and the page object itself is written in simple to-do page class. Here I have some methods to navigate, to get text box that I will use to type the text. I also have method to get button for adding the task and button for deleting the task. And in order to delete the task, I need to provide the ID. So this is the page object, and the test is really simple. For arranging, I'm creating this page object, and then I use navigate to open the page, and later this add task will type into the field my task, and after adding the task, I expect to see this task added on the page. Let's run it. Make test. Now it will run in headless mode, but still see the time for execution is around 2 seconds. Let's try to uncomment headless mode to be able to check how it works. Let's start it again. You may see the browser page is open. I'm typing, clicking done, that's it. So in this mode, it runs for 3 seconds. Okay, this is just to compare. This is the way we use to write the tests. We have browser, we want to emulate, not emulate, but simulate some user sections, and then we assert the result. Let's check how the same case can be implemented in pure JS DOM. I will open my JS DOM project. I can close this one. So let's see what we have here. Again, I will show the application. The application should be available here. A little bit different application. It has new feature, like you can create different lists. The general is the default one. If we add task 1, for example, task 2, it will be added here. If we add secondary, it will create new to-do list. We may switch it and create new task inside it. Something like that. And let's see how the test case look like. So here we have a lot of preparation. Basically, in pure JS DOM, we need somehow to bypass the HTML to the library to be able to process it. And after that, we should use a low-level API, mostly document query selector, to find our elements and to interact with them. So I have object app, and I described 2 containers that I need. This is container that contains my lists. This is container with tasks. And this is 2 forms. One form that I will use to put a new list, and another form to add new task. So the test will look like here. We are basically setting the value to the add task input field. We use data test ID for that. And later we are executing click for the button and check that after the click, our new task form should be empty. We should have task name under the task container, and the list container should have text general. What the problem here, as you can see, the test suite is quite low level. You have to worry about how to bypass this HTML to JS DOM. You have to write long queries to be able to interact with elements. And also, it's quite not real interaction between the user and browser, because you're basically changing the value inside the DOM. you don't operate like a real browser. You don't type something. You just get this node inside document object model, and you just assign this task name. So we may see that it looks a little bit verbose, but anyway, even that can be useful. And let's check how fast this test will run. I will stop the dev server and I will start the test. So you may see the difference. Previously, one test was executed during almost 2 seconds. Here we have only 15 milliseconds for the execution. It's quite a big difference, right? But again, if you will choose just pure JS DOM, it's quite hard to write test cases. And that's the moment to try DOM testing library. Let's check how this library helps us to use JS DOM more natural, and we will see the difference. I will close this project and open the DOM testing library. Okay, let's open it. Okay, this is the test. Again, I will show you how the app look like. Make start. The app should be the same. See, the app is the same. But now we will use the wrapper to write the test case. I will close it. Let's switch to the code. So what we have here, we are using testing library DOM, and we are using testing library user event. This user event library is something new, and this library helps us to not operate on DOM level with objects, but try to replicate the user behavior. For example, when user types something, user puts letter by letter, blah, 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 then hit the enter. So this library will try to replicate this behavior. When user clicks something, again, it's a bunch of events inside browser. And this library also will try to simulate this behavior, not just executing some methods for the button, but really trying to get the same events. So see, we still have to provide our HTML, and we still have to use some containers, but at the same time, the code for the test looks much more easier. We are using screen object, and this object provides useful queries to find the elements. For example, get by label text can be used to find something on the page. I will show you how it works here. Let's see, for example, if we want to find locator. This label text is here, new task name. So this is really close to how user interacts with the web page. And the cool stuff here that DOM testing library wants you to write tests the same way user interacts with your application. and it helps also with accessibility of your apps. So we are getting the new task input. Then we use this helper library user event to type into the field our task name, and then we are clicking. But in order to get the button, we use this query get by role, and we are accessing the button using type. There are many like button, list item, but if you go through the documentation, it's really not so complex. And we are providing button and the name of the button. And the reason why I put slashes here, that I want to use regex to find this button. And even if some text will change, we will be able to get the element of the button and the test will not be flaky. The expects look almost the same. We expect that after adding the task, our new task input will be empty. And we expect that element that will be searched by text, our task name will be inside the document. To be in the document means that this element will be inside the DOM. That's it. This is basically the main part of testing library. But as we know, there are a lot of different frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, the other testing library creates wrapper on top of wrapper. And you will be able to use these high-level tools to work with your framework. Let me show you just some examples. Testing library, where is it? Okay, I will just briefly show what you have to know before start. The main part is core API. These queries like by role, by label text, by placeholder, and the others. You will use it a lot because this is how you find elements on the page. If you work with the framework, basically my example uses this DOM testing library, but for example, if your app is written in React, Vue or whatever, you may choose this high-level library. It will provide you some nice objects that may be used, and the test cases will look even less wordy than I show you. And we will try to use right now some of them. As I told you, I want to show how we will add a new test case using Vue testing library. Before I'm preparing the project, you may ask any question. Don't hesitate. I will now switch to the different project. So I don't need this one. Let's open this one. Okay, it's opened. Again, I want to show you how it looks like. This is the conduit application, the clone of medium.com. I will show you how it looks like. See, this is the main screen. There are posts. Article can be favorited. You may add some comments. You can create accounts, sign in, all these blog related features. So we have UI that is developed using Vue. Let's try to add some test case using our new knowledge. I will do that like from scratch. What I want you to show is how to test isolated components or pages. We see page called article. It already has some tests. The test is basically to expect that if you render article, it should show you article is downloading, because when we first open the app, it needs time to load the data using API. So the test is simple. Let's create test for login page. I have an example, and I want to test not the positive scenario, I want to test negative one. Let's say user put some credentials, email, and password, and after hitting the sign in button, you have this error. It's 403, and the user should see this error message on the screen. And now we will try to use testing library for that. Okay, let's switch to the VS Code. I need to create login spec TS first. Okay, we have this file, and I will use my Sublime to copy the text. So first of all, let's say we need to import the libraries, right? And we need to provide some skeleton for the test itself. So something like that. We will use render function from testing library view. Testing library view is already like high level wrapper around testing library. So we will use this function to render the component, and then we will work with this component. What else do we need? User event, as I told you, to simulate the actions, and we need to import login view. This is the page itself, how it looks like in Vue. I'm not like expert in this field, but this is how the template looks like. So what do we need to install? We will need to install this user event library first. Let's install it. Yarn add -d, because we are installing development library. Sorry. We are adding user event dependency. And what else do we need? Let's see. Let's write some tests. I will start with the render function. This is basically the beginning of your test all the time, because you have to render the component to be able to use testing library to query the elements inside. So this is how we render the component. And let's say I want to type login and password. And in order to do that, I should have some useful methods from testing library. First, I will just import them from the render function. What else do we need? We need also to check that after adding this information, our button should be enabled, because as you can see, I will show you. When we start, here it's enabled from the scratch, but in my application, if I start to type any field, before it should be disabled, and only when I put two fields it should be enabled. This is a different implementation. So let's say we check that button is enabled, and we need to click that button and check that we have some error message. Close this one. So the first version will look like that. Do you have any questions regarding the code? Do I need to explain something? Okay, if no questions, we will continue. So let's say this is initial test, and we will try to run it. To run it, I will use Jest. Jest is a test runner from NodeJS ecosystem. It's very popular. It's a product by Facebook, and it's used also widely. So I will use Jest, and I will tell Jest to run only one spec file. Let's try and see how it goes. I started and immediately got the error. So we see that our test failed. We can't find an element with text invalid password. That's my expectation. And basically, this is expected behavior because we are trying to execute this click without providing any stub or mock for the API call. In order to do that, we need to check how this API is executed. Here we have file called setup test, and we see that all interaction with API is mocked using this Jest function. So let's try to disable the mock, because we are not interested in mocked version. We want actually to test it using some stubs with some replies from the server. I will comment this mock, and we will try to execute the test again. So again, we see the printed out DOM with all the elements in HTML, but again, this error messages list is empty. We don't see anything. And if we scroll, we will see that we have new problem. Our fetch function is not defined. It means that the test can't actually get the data. So we need to figure out how to do that. Okay. When I first saw this error, I started Googling, and I found the great article from the main developer of testing library. His name is Ken Dodds. This article called "Stop Mocking Fetch." I will show you this article briefly. Okay. And if you go through it, the main idea when you mock this fetch functionality, you basically lose your confidence about your test. And we don't want to lose the confidence. That's why the author suggests to use something to provide stubs for fetch and to use it like black box when you test. And for doing so, we need to use mock service worker. This is another library. It's not part of testing library, but this is useful like addition when you want to stub your responses for test cases or for development. If you don't have like existing backend, you may also use this library to provide some basic steps for your application. So let's install it. Okay, MSW, we are installing this library. I will not spend a lot of time to describe how we will use this library. It's not like main goal of the topic. Let's just consider we know how to provide these stubs. I will add them. So what we need, we will need to create folder called mocks, and we will create two files. One file will be handlers, So this file basically describes the APIs you want to stub. So I know the API that is used. You may see, for example, if you try to test the real application, we try to put something, blah, 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 blah. And when we open the network tab, we will see that request goes to API users login. That's why I'm using this API endpoint. So, and basically, I need only one scenario when we post something to this API. I want to respond with code 422 and with JSON with the error message. So this is one file to describe the handlers, and we also need another one to describe how to run the server. File called server script, and that's how we here we basically import function setup server. We provide the handlers that we described here, and that's it. Later, we can add our server to the login spec file. Let's add it here. We import server and we create 3 hooks. Before all hook in jest will have server listen. After each hook will have server reset handlers, and after all hook will have server close. Basically, before all we are start listening. after each test case, we are reset all the handlers and create them from scratch. And after the test execution ends, we will close the server. So that's how it works. Okay. So we may try to run our test again. Let's try it. Executing the same tests. And what do we have right now? Again, we have the same problem. Fetch is not defined. The reason is that fetch can be used from NodeJS perspective and from browser perspective. And in order to provide the implementation for test, we need to use polyfills. That's the answer to this question. I'm going to install the library called this. I even don't know how to read it. Please forgive me. We will install this library and we will add this polyfill to decide what kind of implementation shall the app use. Let's do that by adding new dependency. This time, this dependency will be added to the app, not to the dev dependencies. Okay, installing this fetch, and I need to change the class a little bit. Request TypeScript. Okay, let's find request TypeScript. So I need to import this polyfill here. I will add that. Okay. So let's try again. The same test. Again, it failed. Let's check. See, now we have different problem. If we go through, we finally have error messages list, and we have password invalid, email, or password. So finally, our test case was executed in the right way. We have a mock service worker that stops our response, and we have our login page that is rendered by JS DOM. Everything works, but test failed. So what's the problem? Looks like we put wrong expectation here because text is different. So let's try to change it to, let's say, invalid email or password. Okay, going back, putting the right form, executing the test again, and again it failed. See, we put invalid email or password, but the expect was not resolved. So the problem here that expect try to find the exact element, and as you can see, our element is quite different. That's why I always suggest to use regex or any expect you write. So let's fix it and use regex like I did before. I'm changing only one line. Now it's regex. And let's execute the test again. Finally, we have our test green. Everything is good. As you can see, the test execution is much more than 15 milliseconds we got from pure JS, but the app is quite complex, and I would say that it's still more preferable than having seconds for each browser-based test. So what we can improve here? First of all, I would suggest to forget about all these methods for querying, because we can basically import only one object screen and replace all the queries by screen, find by role, screen, get by placeholder text, and whatsoever. It improves readability of the test. Let's edit screen. Okay, and let's change. I will remove basically this part. We don't need it. And I will add screen everywhere. Okay, looks good. Let's try again. As you can see, it's still green. We have basically all the same, but instead of importing and getting the precise methods for querying the elements, we just get the screen object, and this object has everything we need. So once again, if you open the testing library documentation, so all these core APIs are available inside the screen. That's why it's much easier to use only screen for testing. So what else do we have? Basically, that's our final result. That's all I wanted to show you. And if you have questions, let's discuss it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anthony. I have a couple of questions. So
Yeah,
there's
sure.
low-level libraries for JavaScript, whether it's Puppeteer, whether you are using JSDOM or any other thing. What I've seen with them is like it's very good when you are doing not unit testing, but when you're using it as part of the development code. Like sometimes you use a headless browser just to get some data from where you don't have an API exposed to you. But when it comes to really building a testing framework, whether it's for Cypress also, Cypress seems good, but what I've seen, they have libraries which suddenly people stop supporting because it's not a holistic tool. It's a tool, and on top of that, people build plugins, people build a lot of libraries. For example, they build a library for testing the Chrome extensions, but now the support for that stopped, so you can no longer use it. So that's the biggest risk I see in this JS world, that it's a bit disorganized when it comes to testing. You don't know the library you're using today, just gets the support just stops tomorrow. So how do we get over that part?
I got your question. Thank you, Shashank. I think we will never have the possibility to just get rid of all these browser-based tests, because these tests give you the most confidence. But the main point here that this tool can be very useful when you want fast feedback loop and when you want to run your tests without browser, so on your local machine or whatever. And currently this testing library basically is part of all major frameworks. React is using this library, Vue is using this library. All of them are like heavily depends on this library, and I don't think it will change. I'm not like an expert in this field, but I see that JS ecosystem like has some milestones, and this is not the first implementation for them. They had a lot of libraries before, but I believe that testing library will survive because it really tries to hide the implementation details. It's really close to the browser behavior and gives enough confidence. And I think the best part, if your developers already know about it and they are using it, you may just start contributing to this kind of test, and it will speed up significantly the work for them and for you. That's my understanding. But even Cypress, as far as I know, Cypress also has some kind of emulation. It not always behaves the same way as a browser. So it's a trade-off.
That makes sense. And one more question, like these low-level libraries are very good and very handy to use. Like when you have much experience and you have like some developer experience, or like you're very good at automation. What I've seen, like even the challenge I've seen in the current organization, if I start using these libraries, they require a bit more level of coding skills. And when a new QE joins, maybe a mid-level also who is more used to Cypress or Selenium or high-level coding languages or just coding over the hood, not under the hood. And they get overwhelmed and it gets very difficult to get new people or new QEs to join and start working on that. They say
To
like, no,
onboard,
it's too complex
you
for
mean
us.
you mean to onboard newcomers, right?
Yeah, because they feel like these low-level libraries are quite tough because they require a more better level of understanding of coding, automation, development than like high-level libraries like Cypress or maybe
Mm-hmm.
Selenium. They just work over the hood. We have worked with all of those. So that's one challenge I see when we like I started using Puppeteer for my Chrome extension automation. But when new QE came, like they were a bit old. Why we're using Puppeteer? It requires a much more level of understanding of how the DOM structure works, much more intrusive coding it requires. So in the current QE, I've seen that issue. Like people come from automation side, but they just expect to code on the higher level of automation, just like on wrappers, not really code on the low level of languages. So that's one challenging I'm seeing in the current market for this low level. These are good for developers, for testers it's good, but onboarding and getting talent gets a bit of issue here.
Yeah, I understand. The market is really struggling with the right engineers, and I would say the problem even to find developers who are really interested in using this kind of tools. My personal opinion is that if you're more or less experienced with automation, you have to somehow show some examples to developers. And if they try, at least try this testing library, I think they even may start using it day to day in their tasks. And I think investing in sharing this knowledge and showing the real examples may be more beneficial than just like building a wall where developers still prefer just push something to the master, and then QA engineers will start use their high level tools and find bugs in whatsoever Cypress or something else, because here you even don't need to deploy the application. So it basically gives you opportunity to provide some really simple like smoke tests or something that will prevent build building the not necessary artifacts. But yeah, the main problem is that from my perspective, we still live in a world where developers are in their silos and QA engineers, automation engineers in their silos. And the only way I think is to collaborate more and to share this knowledge. more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Anton. And do share the code after this call, the code base for the demo you gave.
I may share the last part because first one, the implementation for that apps are based on course that I took from Hexlet School. I may share the tests, but I can't share the apps. For this one, for the last one with Vue.js, I can share like the whole project. But by the way, I can even show you this project has Cypress tests. See, I'm not like a big fan or expert, but this project has Cypress tests. You may see fixtures, integration tests. I can show you how it goes. For example, as far as I know, Cypress. I will try to open it. Cypress and all this browser-based stuff is really cool because you have like the exact page, what you see, what you get, all this stuff. The problem with testing library, you have just text bump, that's it, no other stuff. Okay, in order to run it, I have to open the server. Okay, let's try. For example, article. So the main disadvantage for testing library that you are completely blind when you test because you can't just open the page or see some screencast or some picture about failed test. The only way you can debug it, you can only print the DOM in your console. That's why it's quite hard for newcomers, I would say. That's again, that's the challenge and the trade-off here. So that's how the test look like for Cypress. Of course, it's much easier when you can just open the browser and look into each step. You may treat the testing library more like unit testing because I think the best benefit is when you try to test components in isolation. For example, you start working on new component, you may test it without anything. And here for Cypress, you may test the app as a whole. So I will share the link to the project. You may try to play with it.
Thanks a lot, Anthony.